As always, we come together in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Right, I'm very privileged, very honoured that the head has asked me to do this assembly. Obviously, we all know today's the 11th of November, and in this assembly this morning we're going to remember all those who have died in the world wars, but we also think about all those who have been wounded in other conflicts around the world in the service of this country. What I want to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history of the 11th of November, and then talk to you a little bit about some of my personal experiences and what we went through. First thing I want to talk about is something that soldiers hear and they dread hearing. Over the radio, you hear a message, contact, wait out. What contact, wait out means is that you've engaged the enemy, or the enemy have engaged you. Bullets are coming flying in, or an explosion's gone off. This is just a quick clip from contact in Afghanistan. Contact with the enemy can last anything from a few seconds to hours. It depends. I remember my first contact with the enemy. I was 19 years old, so I'm around about the same age as some of you guys at the back. I heard it over the radio and we got to the position where the contact happened. And there was a 19-year-old army lad lying there, guardsman, and he'd been hit by a bullet, a 50 calibre bullet, which is about that long and that round. We patched him up where the bullet had gone in on his chest, but it had exited out of his back. And when we went to patch that up, there wasn't much back left. The message I want to get across by saying that is war is not glorious. It's horrible. It's an awful thing. Very often you're wet, you're cold, hungry, tired, frightened. This isn't an assembly to glorify war. It's an assembly to look at the people who get caught up in these big events and what they have to go through. So, why do we remember? Probably quite a few of you have seen this on the news, the Tower of London, with all the ceramic poppies that have been laid out there. About 4 million people want to see it. There are over 900,000 poppies there. Okay? Each poppy represents one person who was killed from Britain, the Commonwealth, the countries that Britain used to run in its empire. One person who was killed during the First World War. Okay? Every one of those poppies has a story. Every one of those poppies is someone's family who's been torn apart by war. And obviously today, on the 11th, we remember the dead of the wars, because it was on the 11th day of the 11th month of the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month that the First World War came to an end in 1918. Why is it so important to remember? That's a guy called Harry Patch. He fought in the First World War. He was an extremely old man when he died. But he's gone now. He was the last soldier from the British Army who was alive, who had fought in the trenches in the First World War. We have now lost that contact. We can never ever speak to anyone who fought in the trenches in the First World War. It's gone. So it's down to us to remember. You know me, I'm a historian. It's down to us to look at the accounts, the evidence of what went on, and try and make sense of what life was like for these men who fought in the trenches. What really hits me when you look at the service on the Sunday, they had the big service in London for Remembrance. When I was younger, there were hundreds, if not a couple of thousand World War I veterans used to march past and lay their wreaths. They've all gone now. And I watched some of it on Sunday, and the World War II veterans, the people who fought in World War II, they're very few now. They've gone nearly. They will go in your lifetimes. If you get a chance to speak to any of those people, the things that they went through are far, far, far greater than anything I went through. If you get a chance to speak to someone who fought in the Second World War, do it. Because they won't glorify war. They'll tell you what it was like, how they felt, how scared they were. And a lot of them will probably tell you about the laughs they had with their mates as well. Just to give you an idea about the slaughter that took place in the First World War, that's the largest British military cemetery in the world. That's at a place called Tyncott in Belgium. As it says there, there's 11,000, nearly 12,000 servicemen who are known to be buried there. Their names are on the graves. There are 35,000 whose names appear on a huge big wall at the back of the cemetery. They've got no known grave. Literally most of those men, young men, not much older than us, were blown to pieces. In fact, the youngest serving soldier that we know of in the First World War was 14. So quite a few of you here are older than he was. He was killed. You can go and see his gravestone, that's in Belgium. Now, some of the idea of the slaughter, if you look past the gravestones to that piece of land, they still think there's about 150,000 bodies buried there, never been discovered. Okay? This is an area near where a famous battle called Passchendaele was fought. Over 90 days of that battle, on average, the British Army lost 3,000 men a day. So that's why we remember. To put it into context, although Afghanistan and the most recent war we fought in, we're not here to discuss the rights and wrongs, that's for another day. Wars happen, people go and fight in them. We can discuss the rights and wrongs of the other day. But to put it into context, 453 servicemen and women died over a 13-year period. But there were 3,000 a day on average for 90 days. The battle that took place just away from that graveyard. The guy who fought there is a Canadian actually, a guy called Major John McCrae. He fought in Passchendaele. He was a surgeon, a doctor. I'm not going to read the actual poem out to you, you can see it on the board there, but the reason he wrote that is he was serving around that area of the cemetery that I've just shown you. And his best friend, another doctor, was blown to pieces by a shell exploding. And he wrote that poem a couple of hours afterwards. And one of the most famous lines in it is in Flanders Fields, the poppies blow. It links to why we wear a poppy. In the carnage of the battlefields of the First World War, when all the earth, all the trees had been churned up or destroyed, one of the first things that settled there after the fighting was poppy seeds, and they were one of the first things that grew. And that is why we adopted the poppy to wear. Again, people choose to wear it or choose not to wear it. That's entirely personal opinion. But that is the reason that we wear it, because the poppy was the first sign of life after all the death and all the carnage of the First World War on a lot of the battlefields. I'm going to move it forward now to the Second World War. This is a clip from a film called Saving Private Ryan. It actually shows American soldiers landing on the beaches of France in 1944 on something most of you probably all heard called D-Day. The reason I'm showing this clip is it is universally regarded that this film is the closest that you'll see soldiers coming to combat without actually being in it. Okay, it's fairly graphic and it shows the realities of war. Ex-servicemen, people who lived through that, said that is about as close as you can get without actually doing it. So again, I'm just going to show you this quick clip so you get an idea of what people go through. Remember what I said, it's not a glorification of war, it's people, normal people like us get caught up in these massive events and we end up being there. So have a look what happens and what happens with the people who go through this big event. you can to actually combat without actually doing it. At the start, Tom Hanks is there, and he's trying to show us in a bit of a daze about what's going on. As I say, I never went through anything as bad as that, but I know for a fact that when something happens, an explosion or gunfire comes in, it takes you a few seconds to get your head around what's happening. Someone's trying to kill you. And then you switch on, your training kicks in, and you start doing your job. So, why do we do it as soldiers? Pride. Pride in yourself, wanting to wear a uniform. Patriotism, love for your country. A lot of people do it for that reason. Because we're told to. Back in the First and Second World War, people were told, by law, you have to go and fight. A sense of duty. Right? My dad was an ex-Marine, he was big into duty. He handed that home to me. He went full, did service for his country out of a sense of duty. Adventure. A lot of people in the First World War never left their town or village in England, in Britain, and they went because there was a chance to go abroad. It was a big adventure. Peer pressure. Again, in the First World War particularly, blokes were going to their mates, come on, join up, don't get killed. Come and join up with us, come and fight. It'll be over soon. So peer pressure, we all know what peer pressure is. A better way of life. I wasn't quite as switched on as my dad. I thought I was too clever at school to listen to the teachers and do what I was told. And I mucked up big time. Left school without any qualifications, and you do that, you don't get a good job. And I had 2 rubbish jobs. And it's only when I grew up a little bit, I thought I need to do something here, I need to get a career. So that's why I joined the army, to get out of the rut I was in, because I hadn't listened and hadn't done well at school. And I know quite a few of you who I teach, I've told that story to, so it's a lesson. Take advantage of your opportunities, and you don't get left behind. So that's why I joined up. Protect families and friends. Obvious. You do that, it's the most important thing. Protect your family and your friends. And when you're in there, it's your mates. Your mates are everything. They're the people who are going to look out for you, and you're going to look out for them. Well, there's nothing like it in the civilian world. Okay? You are absolutely working together as one, looking out for each other as one. That's my mate Colin. Excellent guy. Comes from the North East. Similar accent to the head. We served in Colchester together. We used to have a room across from each other. We were both corporals at the time. And because we were what they called section commanders, we had our own rooms. And after a day's work, we used to go in, have a cup of tea and a chat and a laugh. Became good mates, and we used to do a lot of work together as well. And we worked very hard. And we went out. We played hard as well. So if you think of the stupidest, most mad thing you've done, times that by 100, and then you get to where myself and Colin were. We worked hard and we played hard, we were good mates. Even I had days off. Colin was a dog handler, and I used to go out, and this is how daft I am, I used to play as bait for his big Alsatian. I had a big pad on my arm, and used to let the Alsatian chase me and catch my arm. Okay? I was there when Colin met his first wife. Lovely lady. So we stopped going out for a drink so much on a Friday because he was going out with his wife, or his to-be wife. Colin was killed. He left behind his wife and 3 children. He was a good guy. He was a really good guy. 10. That's just a number. That's the people I work with, knew as friends, who either got killed or had life-changing injuries when I was in the service. We met Colin, he died after I'd come out actually. That was a real shock. I was sitting there on a Sunday morning watching the TV news and his name came up, he'd been killed. That was a real shocker. And you've got Andy, lost both legs in an explosion. Jan, lost half her face to a bullet. And I'll go on, I find it a bit hard. difficult. So when we have our o'clock silence for 2 minutes today, I see their faces, and I remember them. You might not know anyone, but just spare a thought for the people who get caught up in these events. They might not necessarily want to go, especially during the First and Second World War. A lot didn't want to go, but they did because it was their duty. So just spare a thought for those people who do give anything. As I say, I'll see their faces. Hopefully you'll never be in a situation where you have to remember the faces of friends that you know have died. And there's a famous little poem there. When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we go there today. A lot of these people who die in war are not much older than you guys here. Men and women join up when they're in their late teens and they can find themselves fighting. Okay, especially in the First and Second World Wars. People were joining up at 16, 17, 18 to go and fight and do their duty. And they did, they gave up everything. So is it worth it? Picture of me when I was in the service. Yes, it is. And the older I get, the more it is. Because I look around, when I was in the service, people in my age group were at university, bringing up families, starting careers, and they could do that in safety. And now I've come back into this school and I look at your faces, and that you can come to school, have a great school, have a great education, and come here safely without anything terrible happening to you. Then soldiers have played a little bit of a part in that, because we have gone and fought against some things that would have stopped people doing that. So it's totally worth it. And I've spoken to some old soldiers, and I say the older we get, we look at the youngsters, and it is worth it. The country's not perfect, we know that, but as a rule, we're safe. And some of that's down to the soldiers who gave up the ultimate sacrifice. Probably a lot of you have seen this. They shall not grow old, as they that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the youth them. And going down the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. I can guarantee you, being an old soldier myself, they're not asking you to remember them every single moment, every single day. It's worth giving them just 2 minutes a day, isn't it? They gave it all up. As I say, this isn't to glorify war, to say whether war's right or wrong. These people were caught up in events. Okay, and if we look at the Second World War, fighting something like Nazism, something awful, then I'll say they're worth a couple of minutes. Just 2 minutes at a time, just to be quiet. As I say, I know what I'll be thinking of. Alright, if we can bow our heads, we've got a quick prayer. Eternal rest give unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. May they rest in peace. Amen. Thank you guys for being so respectful. I really appreciate that.